Chanie Wilshanski, welcome back to the show. A new name, Jewish Money Matters. You're not a stranger to the show. You're a friend of the show. Welcome back. It's so good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me back, and I'm excited to be here, Yael. I'm always up for a good conversation.
Since you were last here, just to remind you and remind listeners who may have heard that episode, you were in the midst of this rebranding into Schools of Excellence. You are the CEO of Schools of Excellence. You're an early childhood leadership coach. Not long after that conversation, you and I got to sit together in Brooklyn, where you used to live, and talk all about life, work, family, all of that. Little did we know that, and back then, I should say, you were in the midst of scaling. Like, you were really working on scaling this business, which has since taken off, and perhaps we'll touch on that a little bit. But little did you and I know that a year to the date, pretty much, you would be at the epicenter of a pandemic and a health crisis in New York City, and you would make a really bold decision to physically pick up your family and move down to Florida. So a move I've been following very closely, and I've been like cheering from behind the Facebook space. Tell us what drove that big decision.
Yeah. So anytime we make a big decision to move ourselves from, a place of origin or even just a place where we grew up, there's so much kind of mental conversation that happens. And then there's a lot of kind of responsible decision making that needs to take place when you are part of a family unit. So if you're married and then you add children and then you add multiple children to the conversation, there are so many big decisions that have to be made when you're making the choice of uprooting your family. So it's not just, oh, it's me and my husband, we're going to go uproot ourselves. We're picking up our children who were 10 at the, 10 and 9 and 5 and 2.5 at the time. We're moving schools, we're moving cultures, we're changing so much of community. Like, what are our children going to be seeing? What are they going to be hearing? Who are they going to be hanging out with? Who are our friends going to be? What is going to become culturally normal? All of these things change when you pick up and move. No one city is the same. There's a lot of sister cities in America, or even around the world, but every single city has its unique dynamic. And so when you make a choice to say, we are moving somewhere, what you're really making a change is in a change in identity. I am no longer a New Yorker. I am no longer this person. We are now a family who does X. This is what we value now. This is what's important to us. This is what we're going to put our time and attention to. So I think it's important to understand that a move is not just moving from an apartment to a house, moving from New York to Florida. It's a complete transformation of identity. And when you understand that, you understand the implications of the choices that you're making, because you're truly shifting your entire destiny by making that decision.
I love how you address that, because it almost sounds like the way you work and what you teach, right? Because it really, I didn't think about it, but I've moved many times in my life. And yes, it's really is a cultural shift, right? Like you said, the activities that we're going to be doing, the things that are going to be, our time is going to be spent doing, so much is going to shift here. So what was it for you that you said, because not everybody does this, Connie, especially you grew up in New York. I got to leave New York. It's very different. I've done it. Florida is very different from New York.
Yeah. So Mayor and I have had these conversations for a while before even COVID happened around, wanting more space, wanting a different quality of life, wanting a slower pace of life. But every time we sat in conversation, there was always like, but what about this? But the kids are already in school, but they already have friends, but our family lives here, but this is here, but our job is here, but we have insurance here, and all the but, right? And so you just basically just continue to kick that decision down the road until there's a true crisis or something that really comes up, and it's like, okay, it's now or never, right? Like, now we have to make the decision. And so COVID hit, and so we were in lockdown in New York in our 1,000 square foot apartment for about 4 weeks. The kids were not allowed to leave the house. The playgrounds were shut. Like, every single thing was shut. So I want you to imagine 1,000 square feet with 6 human beings not leaving the house. There is no porch, there is no playground, there is no outdoors. There are sirens playing consistently throughout all hours of the day. My children were remember growing up in a war zone for 4 weeks. And so by the time Passover hit, so, COVID hit right, around the Purim holiday. And so when Pesach came around, I was like, Mayor, we're not staying here. Like, it's just not happening. We are getting out of here. He's like, where are we going? I'm like, I don't know, but it's not here. And I started Googling Airbnbs and seeing what we can rent for the holiday. And so I found this place, and I called them up and I was like, hey, I'm booking this for the next 3 weeks. And then I told me, I was like, by the way, we're going to New Jersey for Pesach. I already booked the place. And so we booked this place, we packed everything up, we went to this Airbnb, and we actually ended up staying there for 9 weeks. The kids were all virtual school anyway, so we didn't have to be in New York. And so we stayed in this really big house in New Jersey that had a huge front yard and a huge backyard, and we had a parking place and all of these different things of suburban life. And we started to really observe the differences in our family dynamics, how the children were interacting with each other, our stress hormones and our stress levels, that in our engagement with the children, our conversation after the kids were sleeping, how exhausted we were, how not exhausted we were now, mental space, all of these different things that take a massive shift simply from, I have a laundry room in that house. So laundry wasn't all over my dining room table like it was in New York. Laundry was in the laundry room. These things sound silly. You might be laughing, but when you don't have that kind of space and all of a sudden you do, it truly impacts your mental well-being. And that impacts your marriage, it impacts your quality of life, it impacts the relationships you have with your children. And so that was the beginning of daily, really nightly conversations that Mayor and I were having with each other of, we have to get out of New York. Like, is this what we want for our family? Like, do we want that consistent high stress level, or do we want this, what we have here right now? Because this is temporary, right? Like, we're renting this place. So that was really the beginning of the conversations of like, we need to get out. Like, this isn't a fit for the future of how we want our children to be raised.
Wow. I mean, there's so much here. Now, what about the financial piece of this? Because, obviously the numbers play a big role here.
Yeah.
What were the kind of financial considerations and decisions and things that you had to have in place to make that move tangible? You could be thinking about it, but like, when push comes to shove, you were able to do it. What were those things, the ducks in a row that you felt like, okay, I have it?
Yeah. So I'm saying for a couple years before then, we were being very consistent about what we saved. We knew that we wanted to buy a house eventually. And so we were very consistent about every paycheck that came in, the percentage that went, towards a house. And so it was something that we've already been planning for a very long time, that eventually we want to purchase a home. We want to move. So there was a lot of money sitting in a savings account for a very long time, over a decade, just accumulating there, waiting for when it would be time for us to make this move. So that was the first thing, is that these decisions happen way before. You can't say I'm moving and then, have $250,000 waiting for you to make that move. You really have to be accumulating that over a long period of time. So that was the first thing. The other thing is I run an online business, right? And my business has always been completely remote. And so because I'm the main primary breadwinner in our family, it wasn't like, oh, but where's Mayor going to work? But where I'm going to work? How are we going to find a job here? It was, okay, we moved my business from here to here. We're changing the zip code. We're changing that. No more New York State income tax. Bye. Love you. Never see you again. Very excited about not doing that. And that was the transition, right? And so yes, Mayor needed to find a job, of course, but it wasn't, if Mayor doesn't have a job, we can't move. It was, we have the financial means to make the move. And then it would be amazing if Mayor finds a job and we have, the extra cushioning that we need. Of course, when a big move like this happens, financial stuff pop up all the time. But it wasn't like, I can't move unless there's a job.
Wow. That is so powerful. That
huge privilege,
huge privilege, but we have to give you guys credit. Yes, it's a huge privilege, but it came with a lot of work. And one thing that you don't know is that I very often use you in my classes with my students as an example, because you may not be aware that you posted once a Facebook post. I probably didn't comment. I don't know if I did, but I quote it very often. I say, I have a friend who just moved to Florida during the pandemic, and she shared how she exercised the savings muscle because she knew she had a goal and she set up a system to fund that goal. And she said that there were some months, and that's you, Connie, there were some months that you only could deposit $10, sometimes even $1. Yet
Yeah.
you and your husband stayed committed to doing that.
Yeah.
And this is the
Yeah.
result.
Yeah, and I think that's where the discipline comes in. You know, I just jumped off a coaching call with my clients, and so many of them are struggling with like the discipline of staying consistent with their calendar, the discipline of staying consistent with, you know, boundaries that they have to uphold with parents or with staff or whatever it is. And discipline is really difficult. It's very hard to be self-disciplined. It's very difficult to tell yourself, no, you are not going to purchase that because this is more important. You know, no, you're saying no to this, but you're saying yes to this. And that is really, really hard. It's very hard to be financially disciplined, to say yes to the things that are important to you in the future more than in this, you know, specific moment. It's a lot of impulse control, right? It's really understanding how to make smart financial decisions for the future. So yes, you know, we crossed a huge financial milestone off our list and we purchased a house. Now we're setting other goals around, you know, how quickly can we pay off the mortgage, and what are we looking at when it comes to other financial, like stable things, opportunities. Like we're going to have a bar mitzvah in a year and a half. Like that's a huge financial commitment. And so there's a lot of things that as your family grows and your kids get older, the expenses just continue to grow. They don't get smaller as your kids get bigger. The expenses get bigger.
Yeah, as you're talking about this word discipline, I often feel, and this is probably a generalization, but I do think that we have, well, you and I come from an observant background, and there definitely is that aspect of discipline, right? I see it in my children, right? As we're educating our children, they definitely have the discipline muscle more exercised than perhaps other children, which, it's going to come handy in life. I hope.
Yes, I hope so too. Yeah.
So let's talk about the purchase of the house specifically, which you just mentioned, because I'm sure there were many people out there who probably thought you guys were crazy. You didn't mention that, but I suspect
everyone thought we were crazy. I don't think anyone thought we were sane. So yeah.
and to add to the crazy, like, how are you going to leave your family and how are you going to leave everything, and what's going to be with your kids and all of that. There's the typical, there's also another more conservative approach to such a move that says, well, why don't you just rent for a little bit, get yourself used to it, do a 1-year rental, don't commit to anything. And yet you went all in. What was behind that decision?
Oh my gosh, so many people have asked me this question, and it's so interesting because I feel like every time my answer kind of takes a layer deeper, I think. So you know what I mean? Like I'm like, okay, let me think about this a layer deeper. So, Mayor and I were actually talking about it once. So there's like a saying where like 40 days before the neshama comes down to this world, it's already decided who, their shidduch is going to be, who they're going to marry. So it's ben plani labas plani, right? Who's going to marry you. So there's also which house are you going to buy? So before the neshama comes down to this world, it's already decided which house is going to be your house.
Wow.
So Mayor often says like this was just decided, like this was going to be our home, and so there's so many reasons why we shouldn't have gotten it and why it should have fallen through and all these different stuff, but the bottom line is it was destined to be ours. But I do want to talk about the concept of purchasing right away. So when you're in the middle of a global pandemic and there is so much uncertainty, everyone wants to try to pick the safer route. And so categorically throughout our life, we're taught that renting is safer, right? Because then you could just pick up and move somewhere else, right? Well, I wasn't planning on picking up and moving anywhere else or moving back to Brooklyn. When I left, I was doing a one-way door. I was leaving Brooklyn. I was not coming back to live in Brooklyn. I come back to visit, I come back to spend time, I come back for weddings. I was not making a move to come back. And so people are like, well, what if you're miserable? I'm like, well, what if I'm unbelievably happy?
Wow.
Like, why are we always asking, well, what if you're miserable? What if it doesn't work out? What if it does work out? What if we are so unbelievably blessed and happy? What if that happens, right? Why do we always think worst case scenario? And then I'm like, well, worst case scenario, let's say I'm so miserable, right? And can I be more miserable than I am right now? Can I be that much unhappier than I am right now? No. Then anything is better than this. right? Anything is better than where I am right now, because right now I'm in a terrible place right now, and I know that I have to get out of this, right? The other piece is that I knew there was a part of me that felt that there was going to be a giant exodus coming from New York. And I knew that it was going to come, and I knew we were going to be from the pioneers because we moved in August, right? The pandemic was in March, we moved in August. And the bottom line is, in November, people were buying houses without doing inspection, without anything.
Yep.
People were buying houses on cash. They were offering, a $500,000 more than the asking price.
Mm-hmm.
We bought the house for the asking price. We were able to come before all the madness happened and close on the house properly without bidding wars, 80 people standing in line, all buying a house. Like, we bought it in a very traditional way, where we put in money in escrow, and, we closed the deal, and we met with the person, like, everything associated with that. So there was a part of me, and this is completely from God, where he was like, listen, you got to get out. Like, the craziness is coming. Like, go out, buy your house, right?
It's no coincidence you and I are having this conversation on Parshas Lech Lecha.
I know, right? Go out, get your house, right? The other thing is that, we didn't originally see this house. Like, this was completely out of our quote unquote budget of what we wanted to, spend on a house. And the realtor kept showing us all these houses. I'm like, no, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. And finally he shows us his house. He's like, listen, I know it's a little out of your price range, but I really feel like this is, the forever home. Like, I feel like this is the house that has everything that you want. And so I started scrolling through the pictures. I'm like, Mayor, this is our house. 48 hours later, I put money in escrow. Mayor's like, are you insane? We didn't even see the house yet.
Right on scene.
What, are you crazy? I'm like, Mayor, that's our house. We can always back out. But once I put money in escrow, that's ours. He can't give it to anyone else now. That's mine, right? Because we put the money in there. And the realtor was like, you guys are crazy. You didn't see the house yet. I'm like, I don't care. This is my house. I know this is my house. And then we came, a couple weeks later, we did a proper walkthrough. And then, we started the official, signing of the papers and doing the, the lender and the mortgage and all of that kind of stuff. But the moment I saw the house, I'm like, this is mine. This is our house. This is it.
I feel like this is a recurring theme in your life. Like, when Chanie.
Yeah. And I think it's learning how to really trust that. Right? Like, even when everyone, like your father, your mother, your parents-in-law, your siblings are like, you are crazy, rent. Like, what are you doing? It's a pandemic. Like, don't blow through. Like, that's crazy. You can't do that. Like, what if there's a housing bubble? What if it bursts? I'm like, and what if it all works out? Mm-hmm. Why does everyone have to poo-poo on my dreams?
Sometimes it's better not to share them, by the way.
Oh, for sure. I didn't share half the things that we were doing.
I want to tell you something you'll appreciate. When I got engaged to my husband, no, not when I got engaged. That would be too much. But when I was dating my husband, I did not tell a soul, not even my parents. But it was to the point that after a couple of dates, I then started leaking. I'm seeing somebody.
Sure.
And what do you mean? But who is he? How? What? I'm not saying a word. Saying a word. I told them I'm not saying. And then I called, I'm getting engaged. So, sometimes, and I knew I was going to get engaged from day one. I knew it. But anyway, let's talk about the fact you threw it there. I think it's an important thing to delve into, the fact that you are the main breadwinner in your household. We like to talk about marriage and money on the show because, as you know, money has a big impact on our relationship and our marriage. So what are some of the challenges that come with you're a mom of 4, being also the major breadwinner, and some of the key pieces of advice that you have for married women here? Because as we know, men have their ego that we have to navigate. I mean, it's a delicate situation oftentimes. What can you share about that?
I mean, I think there's so many ways to answer the question. I think it's, are we looking to answer the question from how does it impact my ability to parent because I have the responsibility of of financials? How does it affect our marriage and our personal dynamics? How does it affect my brain space and my ability to just personally take care of myself? I think it impacts every single part of your life when you are responsible for keeping the lights on, and making sure that, the kids are fed. So I think, which angle do we want to kind of explore here? In what area does it impact?
Let's talk about your relationship with your husband.
Sure. So I think the first thing is that, and every man is so different, but it's them really adopting the mindset that it's not her money, it's our money.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that we're a team and we work together. And that means that we work together in all areas, right? So it's changing the narrative of mom is in charge of kids and bedtime and dinner time and, hosting and all of this kind of stuff. Oh, by the way, and she also does all the financial stuff also. But it's recognizing, no, if we're changing dynamics here, right? And if I'm in charge of the financial responsibility, then I need you to carry some of the domestic responsibilities of the household. And so we really have to have those conversations around how do we shift what is fair in our home, right? It's not what's fair in someone else's home. And how are we going to create the dynamic around who does what is delegated, what do we hire out for that someone else can do? And then what are each of us doing and owning? And then the other person is the helper, right? So the person owns it, but then you have a helper, right? So what happens a lot is that women own everything and then their husband helps them. That's not help, right? I don't need helpers. I need owners, right? So a woman, let's say, is in charge of, let's say, dinner, and then her husband helps with the dishes and helps with cleanup. And it's beautiful. It's amazing when husbands help. It's still the woman's responsibility and it's still on her head. So
the headspace, the energy that it takes to plan the menu, and this kid doesn't like tomatoes.
Everything. So when I tell Mayor Tuesday nights, you're in charge of dinner, you're in charge of everything from start to finish. You're in charge of choosing what we're going to have for dinner. You're in charge of remembering to take it out of the freezer. You're in charge of making sure there's enough vegetables. You're in charge of taking it out in time, cooking it, setting the table, getting the kids involved in helping you set the table. You're in charge of managing your time. We eat at 5:30. You can't start cooking dinner at 5:20, right? You're in charge of every single part from start to finish. I walk in like I just walked into a restaurant. That is help. That's ownership, right? Because now I don't have to think about what my family is eating until I sit down at the dinner table, right? So those are the kinds of conversations that we're having where it's not like, oh, but you're the woman, you should do it. Okay, well, like how does that make sense here, right? So we have to have those conversations.
Yeah. And I feel like it's probably a constant thing until we get into the right rhythm and to the right.
And then even when we get into the right rhythm, it changes, right? Something happens in our life and then it disrupts the rhythm. Yeah. So Yom Tov happens, something like a kid comes over, someone gets sick, like the rhythm is always changing. And so this is part of a consistent dialogue. Always. It's always part of a conversation. It's always, Mayor's always asking, what can I remove from your brain? What else can I take off of your brain space? What else is going on? Like what's the running list that's going on in your head, right? Women wake up in the morning with a list and they go to bed with a list, right? And so I always say, like, I don't need more naps, Mayor. I need you to take stuff off my list. I don't need more self-care time. I need you to take responsibilities off my plate. That is what I need.
Have you been spying on some of my conversations at home?
Can you imagine, right? Like, I don't need help. I need you to own these tasks so that I don't have to worry about them. You just tell me, hey, it's done. Great. Right? Like, that's what I need.
Yeah.
Not another bubble bath. I don't need more jewelry. I need you to own these things.
Yeah. And it also speaks to our ability to then completely delegate it, right? Which in your field, right, as we're training leaders, it also applies, right? Like if you're allowing somebody in your team to own something, let them own it, let them burn with it and make tons of mistakes with it, and you gotta just like sit back.
Yeah. You have to own it from start to finish.
Right.
And you have to be the one that comes back to me with the questions, not me to you, right? You're owning this.
Exactly. So this also ties in it's a perfect segue to my next question, which was about how you're a systems person, you're super organized. How have you and your husband now over the years mastered this art of actually managing the finances? Yes, you're the major breadwinner, but once the money comes in the bank, there's so much that needs to happen, right? There's so much. So there's so much communication that needs to happen on top of the type of communication you and I just addressed. How does that take place in your household?
Yeah, so we sit down in the summertime, and that's when we really create kind of our annual budget conversation on, how are we spending money? For us, the year really goes from like Tishrei to Tishrei. Tishrei is a huge financial month, both with Yom Tif and tuition and just finishing to pay for camp. It's like the money's just hemorrhaging out.
Mm-hmm.
So we like to typically have that conversation then. And what I mean by budget, it's really about putting your money to work for you. So it's really sitting down and saying, okay, this dollar is going for this thing, right? This amount of money is going for here. And then it's the complete transparency around understanding when something is not pre-allocated, right? Then we're having a conversation for, is it in alignment with our values? Is it something that our kids need right now? Is it something that we need right now? Or is this just a nice to have and it's a distraction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you a perfect example. My son Mendel is studying for Chidon, which is, the oh my gosh,
The
what is it called?
613 mitzvahs,
Yes,
the
thank
big
you.
test on the
Competition.
613 mitzvahs
Yes.
of the Rambam.
So they have to register for that, right? And that costs money. But we already,
Yes.
pre-budgeted for that. We knew that the kids wanted to join. I have 2 kids joining this year. And then Mendel found out that there's also an opportunity where Tuesday nights they can study with like my shliach. There's like a whole extra thing that they could do. Great. So he said, hey, can I join that? And I was like, sure, let me look into it. So I look into it and I see that it's $200. I'm like, wow, that's a significant amount of money, right? It's not, $20. So that's not something that was pre-budgeted in advance, right? It's not something that was decided, okay, we're going to take $200 and allocate it towards X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And so that's where you're really using your decision-making filter around, okay, is this something that is important to our child's growth, confidence, opportunity, what he spent, like, is this important for him, right? Because this is a purchase that we're making on our child, right? So it's a conversation we're having with our son, it's a conversation we're having with each other, and then we're looking at the financials and saying, okay, are we moving money around to make space for this? Are we pulling money from different places? Like, where is this going right now, and how are we making it work, and does it make sense, right? Are there other expenses that are coming up right now that we also haven't allocated for, that we need to make space for? So we ended up deciding, we were saying yes to it. We redesigned the budget and we said yes to it. But I think that's where you have to have consistent conversations, right? There is constantly looking at the spreadsheet, at the budget, reviewing the expenses. What was this? This was a $15 bank fee. Why are we paying this bank fee? I already spoke to the bank about, dismissing that. Okay, I need you to make this phone call. I need you to call up the bank and remove the bank fee, right? It's not looking at that as, oh my God, now I need to call that. No. That's how we have alignment with our budget.
Yeah.
$15 sounds very simple, but when it's $15 times 12, that's money that could be allocated towards joy, towards something that makes our family richer, towards something that's more aligned with our values, to tzedakah, right? As opposed to bank fees. No, thank you, right? So that's where you have to have those conversations.
Yeah. And the conversations need to happen in an intentional way. They need to be, I feel, I don't know how you feel about this, but in my life, they need to be scheduled. We need to be in the frame of mind. This is what we're doing every Sunday, every Monday, whenever you decide. But it can't be as I'm cooking dinner and you're running to a meeting and the other one. No, that's a recipe for real disaster.
100%. So yeah, we review the financials every Sunday. We have bigger conversations once a month where we're more looking at like bigger expenses, like especially if it's a month that has a holiday inside of it, we're like, okay, what are we deciding? What, how much money are we spending on Hanukkah gifts this year? How much money are we spending on Shalach Manos? Like, what are we doing? What's the budget? Like, it's really, really having those intentional conversations. It's not about being cheap. It's about being intentional about where every dollar is going, because you have other goals that are important.
Yeah. And making sure that your money is really financing those things that are really important in your life, that are go back to those core values of your family. Yeah. Now, honey, this might seem like ages ago to you, but there's so much here in your story of transition from teacher to entrepreneur. And I'd like to zoom in on the financial impetus that drove that bold, challenging transition. What was the financial backstory? What drew you to draw the line and say, I'm building something of my own, no matter what, no matter how hard it is. And now look at you. What was it that what happened that drove you to say, this is it, I'm building something?
I mean, I think there was a few different moments, and different moments kind of lead to bigger decisions. I think one was, Meir was working in a Talmudic college. He worked there for about 9 years. And it was a good job. It paid well. It came with benefits. We got tuition breaks because of that. And it was something that a lot of people in the community were doing, and it was funding our life until it wasn't. And when we started to bump up against, like, we can't afford to pay for this, I can't go to visit my sister over here, we can't fly to this simcha, I can't, I don't know, I wanted to host like an event, and it was like, well, we don't have money to rent tables or chairs or a hall or whatever. And all of a sudden, the things that were important to us, we couldn't fund, because we didn't have the financial means to do it. And I was like, okay, is this what I want? Do I want a consistent life of struggle where I constantly have to tell myself no, and there's a constant life of restriction, and handouts? Or do I want to be in charge of my own destiny and decide, no, I am going to decide how much money I give. I'm going to live and die by my own sword. So I'm going to be the person that's going to say, yes, this is what I'm making. And I'm going to work hard, and I'm going to pray that God, continues to be a partner in the growth of our business. And he's going to guide me, but I'm going to make this leap, because I can't be dependent on what someone else decides I should get paid. I want to decide what I get paid. It's very bold, it's very scary, it's very daring to decide you're going to decide what your paycheck is, when most Americans don't decide what their paycheck is, right? Most Americans come and negotiate a salary, and kind of figure something out. So I think I started to really be like, okay, how am I going to create opportunity? So that's when I went back to school, and I was like, okay, I want to get my master's. I want to look at, some, higher learning opportunities. And it really started with me just trying to open some doors, and not staying in that one place. As you start to open doors, there's a ripple effect that happens by you taking action. It's called, being on the field of play, as my mentor Todd Herman likes to call it. And so each interaction where you put yourself out there brings you to a different opportunity. And so as I started to give workshops and trainings and different things like that, I was like, well, what if I turn this into a business? What if this became something that I could actually do? I think when we think about what it means to be an entrepreneur, for me, I look at myself much more as a CEO right now. I have a team of 7 people. I'm driving the vision and the culture of the company. We have people that are in all parts of our, operations, marketing, delivery, who are driving the delivery and, driving the growth of the company. When I think about the opportunities that being a CEO brings, but also the tremendous responsibility. When COVID hit, I was responsible to give payroll, whether or not money was coming into the business. I'm responsible to take care of these people who have families. And so that comes with a tremendous responsibility. And it also comes with a tremendous privilege. I get to be the person that provides opportunity for all these amazing women. So I think there's so many different ways you can look at it, right? Do we look at it as a yoke of responsibility? I have to do payroll. Or do we get to look at it as, I get to do payroll? I'm the person that runs payroll. I'm the person that has created a space for all of these amazing people to have a job that brings joy and fulfillment and, financial stability to them. So I consider it to be a tremendous privilege to be able to be a person that is in charge of payroll and has created jobs for other people.
I think there's so much here about us maximizing a potential that we didn't even know existed, right? And waking up every day and say, God, use me, I'm available. Like, this is scary, but here I'm going to do it, right? I'm going to go get on the stage and speak my words and see who it impacts and see where that leads me. And all there's so much here, and living with that constant trust, right? As that famous Hayam Yam says, that a business person sees the hand of God so much more than somebody who's not engaged in business, right? And you and I know it, right? You constantly see the open miracles.
All day.
So there's so much beauty here in the journey, in the entrepreneurial and the business journey. Now let's talk about your business and the impact that COVID has had on it, because I can imagine you being in the field of educational leadership, your work has become even more relevant and critical, I hope. What's been the impact that COVID had on your business?
Yeah, I think when COVID first hit, it was, definitely a huge financial blow. We had a lot of schools that closed down, a lot, like there's just a lot going on. And so it was very uncertain for a lot of people. I think the biggest opportunity that COVID really brought to our company was really having the opportunity for us to step back and ask ourselves, what is the business that we want to build? What is the product that we're truly creating here? What is the service that we really want to provide for our clients? Because, there's so many people that do what I do. But I think the bigger question I needed to ask myself was, what is going to be unique about schools of excellence? What are people coming here to get that they can't get anywhere else? And what do I want to be known for? And so it's really about, that's when so much of the mission statement was driven around, we're creating a global conversation around what it takes to build and sustain schools of excellence. And when I say global conversation, I mean the global conversation. This isn't just about conversation with here in the States or Canada. This is a global conversation with people from all over, bringing in their experience around what is excellence, what does it mean to be in the pursuit of greatness, what does it mean to be self-reflective and disciplined as a leader, and what does it mean to hold space and inspire other people to want to do better. So that has consistently up leveled myself to be, well, what's next? What is the next training I could provide for my people? What is the next podcast episode I want to, design? Where am I pushing these people? Because if I'm not constantly up leveling, I can't pour into these people. So I've really designed a business that consistently keeps me in a position of constantly growing and learning, because that's the only way I could provide that value and stay current on exactly the pulse of what my people need in this specific moment.
I love that you use that word value, because and just stay current on what they need, right? Building a business is about others. What does the world need from me? And let me now step up and deliver it, right? And then that results in a financial transaction. That's where the money comes, and that staying focused on adding the value based on what they need, not what I want.
always. And really believing that the chips will fall where they need to, right? Whenever I get on a phone call, whether it's a sales call, a coaching call, whatever it is, like for me, it's always about that silent prayer right before, like, God, give me the words that I need to be able to have the impact that I want on these people. And I'm in your hands. Like, so if I'm supposed to make the sale, I will. And if I'm not, then thank you for protecting me from this person. And, it'll come from someone else.
Chanie, are you loving Florida?
We are. It's still pool season. We're enjoying it. It's beautiful. So kids are still in the pool every single day. The heat's slowly going away. So soon it'll be winter. It'll be 70s here, which we're excited about. But we're just really grateful for the decision to be able to have a slower pace of life, not running everywhere at every moment. My kids, it was very interesting. I actually was I was driving the kids somewhere, and someone didn't see the turn signal. So I waited a couple of seconds, and then I actually gently beeped the other person, and Goldie's like, oh, Tati never beeps. And I'm like, oh, you have forgotten that season of life, girl. I'm like, wow. It was hilarious. And then all the kids chorus with her, yeah, Tati never beeps. And I'm like, am I the villain here that I beeped someone? What happened here? So it was just really funny, really, just looking at something as simple as, the kids don't even remember a time when we used to beep the driver in front of us 4 seconds after they went. What 4 seconds? A split second for not moving.
That's Brooklyn for you people.
Yeah. So our kids don't even remember a time like that. And this is what, a year and 2 months in, they're like, oh, he never beeps. I'm like, I'm so glad that that's not part of your memory anymore. That's amazing.
Sounds like the move has been good for everybody.
Yes, it's been very, very nice. Baruch Hashem, we are very grateful for the continued blessings, and I hope to continue to be able to just create the home that we can continue to have those blessings and be able to give to others.
Amen to that. Let's wrap it up with Jewish money matters, fill in the blanks. And these are very similar to some that you did before, and you're just going to answer with the first thing that comes to mind. Okay, when I give Meiser or tzedakah, I'd like to give to.
So we like to give to people that need help with groceries. So we'll usually sometimes give to places in Israel or sometimes locally here for people that just need help literally to fill their fridges with food.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Is there a personal impetus for that? It's something
I think, every once in a while when I open my fridge and it's so full, and I open my pantries, or Mayor comes back from Costco with and the entire island is full of food, I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so lucky. Look how much food we have in our house. And I always tell that to the kids, we are so lucky. How many choices? Do you want green grapes or red grapes or black grapes or this thing? We're so blessed. So I don't know. I guess every once in a while I get overcome with it, and I'm like, okay, I need to fill someone's fridge with food.
Yeah, yeah.
So
We have so much abundance. We
yeah,
do have so much.
yeah.
I'd love to make more money because
I want to be able to give more and more charity. There's so many organizations that Mayor and I feel so strongly about that we consistently want to give to. And I think for me, every time I reach a new threshold in our financial thing, I'm like, wow, like look what 10% of our profit is now. Like that's incredible.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You know, we talked about your savings muscle. I always say that the foundation of it all is like God is everything is just so brilliant by our creator, right? Just the fact that he set up a system where you have to give 10%. We have to set up that discipline of separating miser and desting it somewhere so that it then gets funneled to who needs it. That's the foundation for everything else. Talk about the conversation we had before about funding our goals and our dreams and our values, right? That's exactly how we do it, but it starts with the giving, right? Once you got that down, then the rest is just doing the same.
You're giving to your future self when when you do things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Money, spiritual or physical?
Spiritual all the way. Whew. Yes.
Something I splurge on unapologetically is
I don't have anything I really splurge on. I like to, well, the truth is for Yom Tif, I love buying delicious different kinds of food, like a different kind of salmon or tuna or a different kind of bread or dessert. Like I love adorning the holiday table with impeccable dessert and food, like the table truly fit for a king. Like that is something I don't look. I'm just like, no, I like this, I like this, I like this. Like let's make the table beautiful. Yeah,
beautiful.
for sure.
Chanie Wilshanski, spender or saver?
Saver. Oh, yes.
Were you always
the spender? I'm the saver. I'm always like, okay, we have to put this aside. Was I
really?
always a saver? Yes. I think even as a teenager, even when I just first got a job, I've always been like, okay, this is the paycheck. Okay, where does this need to go? Where does this need to go? Where does this need to go? Um, yeah, yeah,
Good for you. Good
yeah.
for you. I hope it translates into investing also, making that money grow for you
Yes,
too.
yes, 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 yes.
Okay,
yes,
good.
yes.
Today I'm most grateful for.
I'm most grateful for my relationship that I'm continuing to build with God. I think the more that I take the time to really cultivate, like, help me trust you, help me continue to believe in you, like, help me continue to see you in every single step of the way. I think the more that I can cultivate that relationship, the more peace it brings to myself, the more peace it brings to my home. And so for me, I'm just grateful that I continue to make that a practice because I know how much peace it brings to my life.
Beautiful. And finally, I'm Chanie Wilshanski, and I believe Jewish money matters because
It matters because the Jewish women are the foundation of the home, and we are really what the next generation is about. Our children are looking at us. They're, asking questions on, how do we do this in our home, and how do we do this in life, and how do we do this in life? And so they're watching how we spend the money, how we use it, how we save it, and it matters because they're the continuity, right? They're the generation. And so I want our kids to know that we're always giving charity. I want our kids to know that our home is about hosting, it's about giving, and money is a tool to do beautiful things.
Chanie Wilshanski, thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you're continuing to do. You're such an inspiration. I feel so privileged to call you a friend and tell listeners where they can continue to find you. I know there's a podcast now, which I'm super excited for you about.
Yes, definitely go check out the podcast. It's Schools of Excellence. We just celebrated our 50th episode, which is super exciting. So Schools of Excellence podcast, I talk about all things in the pursuit of excellence. So it's not just for school leaders. I talk a lot about just what it means to be in the pursuit of something that's greater than yourself. And you can also follow us on social, on Instagram, on Facebook, and give little snippets of our life and just what we're up to. So that's where you can find us.
Thank you so much, Chanie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. I did well with the time.
Amazing.
Yes, Chanie?
Amazing. You rolled exactly with the time. I'm gonna balance because I actually have a doctor's appointment.